I was super excited. We had just closed our Series A with a strategic partner for our online real estate marketplace that had 30,000 freemium users at the time. And our strategic partner was going to help us start monetizing that customer base. So we did everything by the book. We hired the best consultants, and they talked to 1,500 of our customers. They came out with a huge price plan. Everything was great, like really amazing, and like everybody's in the winner mindset, right? So so everybody's waiting for the launch. They've set the price tag, the price. And yet it was a flop. So even after all of that work and so many people involved and significant budgets being involved, we converted only 1% of our customer base to this new product, and instead of 25%, which was forecast. And that made me think and revisit. That was probably, I don't know, the 7th or 8th time that pricing had gone away, and I basically revisited how I'm looking at pricing, and that's what I'll be sharing with you guys today. In the end, I'll go over the specific method that I'm actually using right now when I'm looking at pricing, and how to look at and focus on pricing first rather than being it a complete flop. So when I was starting out in my 20s, and the first company that I was building by myself was a detergent solution distribution company. Basically, we were just selling and we were buying and selling industrial grade detergent solutions. And I knew a few people in the market, and when I asked them how they're working with pricing, they just said, industry standard is a markup of 120%. So just go with 120%, right? So we went with that. That didn't work out that well. We were still running around chasing money, looking at where things can be, how can we streamline the processes, all this kind of stuff. It wasn't really, really, really great. Then at a certain point during the real estate marketplace, we had also built on the side an agency, a marketing agency that helped real estate agents and brokers market their services, basically. And there we had another thing, which was, we sell by hourly rates, and we're like, okay, what are hourly rates? Hourly rates are basically, it's another markup of an hourly rate that basically you're reselling your own employee times, right? And there also we were looking at some agency standards, and we spoke to a few people, and they're like, well, listen, for junior level, entry level type of work, it's usually a markup of like 100%. If you want partner level access, that you can go for a markup of like 150%, right? And that's what we went with, and it was working okay. But if it would have been the main business, it wouldn't have been done okay, because it was a side business, and we managed to split the costs basically for what my company needed in terms of marketing and resell the extra hours to other customers. It was all right, it was decent, but on its own, it wouldn't have made any money. So then I kind of revisited everything, and I looked at we're looking at kind of like external validation for pricing. What can we do internally to internally validate it, right? So I've tried everything from competitor-based pricing, where you look at what the competitors are priced out in the market, kind of make a value proposition analysis, and based off of that, just plot it somewhere lower or higher depending on the features and these kind of things. We've also tried tiered pricing, which everybody knows the trick. Put 3 things. You expect that the one in the middle is always going to be the one that everybody chooses the most, and stuff like that. And that hasn't worked out that well for me either. All of these methods out there that people talk about, looking at benchmarking and these kind of things, didn't really work out for me. It was always still, ups and downs, not clear. The business was working, but it could be worked better. And we've also tried the default kind of which is a regressive discounts, right? So you start at a high price point and you give an aggressive discount for a limited time, or for a season, or for whatever. Everybody knows this. Everybody's using this. I mean, you've seen it, all the courses online and everything like that is sold that way, right? Hey, I'm giving value of 5,000 only for 95, 50, 95, 99, right? Or 59.99, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. But it's a discounted way. That taught me, actually, if you have a discounted way, it's very hard to work with clients. It's all right for customers, one-time purchases, that is. But for clients who you want repeat business from, it's a very bad strategy, because every single time when you have a renegotiation of the contract, the only thing they're going to ask you is like, okay, so what level of discount are you giving me this year? I've been with you already for 5 years. You should give me a bigger discount, right? Yeah, fuck no. How am I supposed to grow, right? So regardless of the strategy, I always ran into, discrepancies between my forecast and my actuals, where money is coming in, where is it going out, all these kind of things. So, taking away time and my brain bandwidth from actually focusing on growing the business and looking at like plugging holes and like where can we find finances to do some of the things that we need to cover, some of the costs that we need to cover, for example, right? And in my view, there are 5 jobs that a price actually needs to do, okay? And yes, I said jobs because it needs to cover 5 specific aspects of your business. Otherwise, the price is not doing its job correctly. And here are the 5 jobs. So first and foremost is paying your suppliers on time, okay? Most of you are probably calculating gross profit, which is, what is the cost that you buy a good and sell a good for. Since we're doing a video on services, I'll stick to services. So this would be like, okay, what people do seem to be confused about a little bit is what exactly goes into suppliers when you're a service type of business. And the way you should think about it is there's only one question you should ask yourself when you're looking at what is in the supplier cost. So ask yourself, if we didn't deliver any work this month to customers, would we still incur this cost? If the answer is yes, and you still incur the cost, irrelevant of your deliverables, then that is not going into your suppliers, okay? So these are costs directly associated with any work and any suppliers or anything that you deliver to customers that has a cost for you, right? So if you're, for example, a marketing agency and you're delivering some content work for somebody, the tools that you use, so like say nowadays, AI and stuff like that for like generated images, all of this kind of stuff, so on and so forth. If you're covering those costs directly and reselling it, basically you're reselling it, right? Then those would be the costs that you put in the supplier costs. So those costs need to be covered, and that's the first job a price should have, right? It should have that component of it. How much is it for per customer? And the way I think you should be looking at pricing is per unit. So all of these 5 jobs need to be done on a unit level, so that every unit that you sell, and it doesn't matter if it's a specific service or a specific package or a specific offer that you have, count that as one unit and look at it on the extrapolate and look at it from these 5 perspectives. So the first one we've already went through. Second one. So the second one is kind of like a hidden cost in the sense that there are costs associated with running your business. And very specifically here, I'm talking about payment gateways or ways that you collect money, right? Now, if you invoice people, then you don't really have costs because they're sending the money direct to your bank account, right? But, however, you want to be able to take money there on the phone, right? So you're gonna have some kind of system, be it Stripe or whatever other competitor out there, right? So with Stripe, what actually happens is everybody thinks, yeah, but they only take 2.5%. It's not a big thing, blah blah blah. Actually, it is kind of a big thing because they take 2.5% off the total amount. So they take 2.5% of whatever your margin is plus all the costs on top of that. So, if you have 50% profit margins, then it's going to be 5% actually from your profit, not 2.5%, right? So think about it in those terms. The other kind of thing here with fees is that they also block a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time. Now, it will depend on the country, it will depend on a lot of things, but for me, when I was running the marketplace, I was super surprised once we had that up and running because they froze 10% of all the revenue for 6 months. So the way I looked at it was that, okay, I know I'm going to get it in 6 months, but my business is not going to work on waiting for that money to come in 6 months. So the way to go about that is basically just to factor those 2 principles into your pricing and just understand that you're going to have that there, right? Of course, once you get that money after 6 months, that's great. Some of the money is not going to come back because some of your customers are going to, dispute the transactions and these kind of things. And, you're going to get something back. But in general, think about it. You have 2.5% that you're paying on top on your total price, plus 10% is usually frozen for a certain period. Now, in other systems, it might be 60 days, 90 days, whatever it might be, but factor that in, or at least factor in the time that you're not going to get 10% of your money until, 90 days later. Job number three. Job number three is paying your overheads and taxes on time. All right. So, remember when I asked you the question of, are you going to incur the costs regardless of if you're delivering to a customer or not? Well, this is the part where this is everything that's included in that, right? So just list out all your overheads, all the costs that you incur, employees, rent, equipment, anything else, fuel, wages, wages we already had, but, everything that you have in there that's basically costing your business just to keep the lights on, right? Just to keep the place alive, not servicing customers, right? And the other thing that you need to calculate here is your existing setup. So it doesn't matter if you're a solopreneur or if you've got a team working with you, or if you're a company and you have already departments and you are servicing multiple customers. What you need to know is what is the maximum capacity of customers or the maximum capacity of offers that we can have being run at the same time. It might be hours, it might be clients, it might be offers, it doesn't matter. But what is the unit economic, like the thing that you're selling? So on the unit level, you also need to know what is the maximum capacity. So how many customers at a max can you have? Okay, the fourth job, in my view, is you should factor in cash crunches, cash flow gaps, these kind of things that you know are coming, all right? So remember the 10%, for example, from the payment gateway. That's something that needs to be factored in. You can factor that in easily. It's not really a problem, right? But if you're working with post-pay and you have historical data, just look at, on average, what percentage of your customers are late payers, and just factor that into the cost. If it's 5%, 5%. If you don't work with post-pay, great for you. You can skip this kind of, but you will have the payment gateway thing, so you still have something to put into this fourth job, right? So these basically you can already calculate them from your previous, and so budget it, right? That's what a budget is. It's looking at your previous 12 months and forecasting it out to the next 12 months. And the fifth job is very important actually. The fifth job is it needs to cover investment, and it needs to cover the part that is fueling the growth of the business. So it's covered all the expenses, but also it's covering the engine that's growing the business to go further. And I think if you have all those five things, and if that price point covers those five things, then you have actually the break even, the very minimum number that you need to know that you're not going to be in trouble if this grows at this price point. So let's go through my real estate marketplace CRM product line together, and I'll show you what that looks like for each one of these. Right. So number one, gross profit. Gross profit was not a big thing for us because we hosted everything. We built everything ourselves. There's very little suppliers that we needed everything on the supply side was in a cost that was on our side. So it was only €1 per customer basically. Next, our payment gateway took 2.5% plus 10% was frozen for 6 months. So we're going to factor in 10% on top of that. So next is our overheads. So for our overheads here, basically I extrapolated that we would pay around €212,000 per year on everybody to keep this business alive and running. So that's the office, hardware, people, so on and so forth. And so you divide that 212 by 12 months, and then divide it also by 5,000, because our business was on a monthly, and those 5,000 could be different part of it would churn, part of it would stay, and part of it would be new customers. So it's just a 5,000 max capacity every single month. For the cash flow gaps, everybody was paying us upfront because it was through the payment gateway, so we didn't have a problem with that. But we had got to factor in the 12.5%, well, the 2.5% for the pricing and the 10% for the credit crunch, right? And last but not least, we were quite ambitious, and we wanted to get a budget out of these 5,000 customers of 20,000 euros per month to spend on ads. Okay, so that's very simple. We divide 20,000 by 5,000. We get 4 euros, right? So you'll see here that I have two kind of columns. I have purely break even, and I have what it means at 20 euros. And let me break that down for you guys so that you understand a little bit better. So suppliers are the same, right? We said it's 1 euro. So purely on the break even side is going to be 1 euro. Then our overheads, the 212,000 divided by 12 months divided by 5,000 is 3 euros 53. Then next, the investment side, that was 4 euros. So these are all the known costs that we have. Put that all together, that's 8 euros 53 per customer of just costs that I will have associated with that, right? Because the investment, remember, it was kind of like to fuel this, that we have the 5,000 customers, right? So that's why it's included here. The 20,000 is so that it's fueling so that we have the 5,000 customers all the time. And so next, what are we looking at? So we're looking at payment gateway. So if we were just to sell this at break even, for example, right? Like if we would get investment coming in and we wanted to be aggressive in the market with our pricing point, then we would sell it at like just break even, for example. So 853, 2.5% of that is 21 cents. Then 10% of that is 85 cents. So actually the total price, your break-even price, the minimum price at which it should be sold is 9 euros 59. Why is it 9 euros 59? Very, very simple. Because you need to also pay the payment gateway, and yeah, you'll get the 10% back, but it'll be in 6 months, great. So that's purely a break-even number. Let's go quickly over what happens if you look at if you put a price point of 20 euros. And if you put a price point of 20 euros, the supplier is going to be the same, overhead is the same, investment is the same, so the total is the same. So your total is the same, but the payment gateway now is going to go up because it's taking 2.5% off of the 20, right? So the difference here, look, the difference is between 21% to 50 cents. That's more than double, right? And then in terms of cash crunch, it goes from 85 cents to 2 euros. Because that's what they're keeping now from your total revenue, right? So now the total of your minimum actually has gone up. And it's gone from 9.59 to 11 euros and 3 cents, right? So what happens with that? Well, you have some money left over, so you have a profit, right? But if your total price is 11 euros of your costs, these are your expenses, this is stuff that you've committed to, that you need to pay, then you're left with less than 50%, right? You're left with 8 euros 97. And that's not the only thing. Like at a certain state, like until you've reached break even, there's no tax, right? But as soon as you've reached break even, you're going to start paying tax. So it's actually, you have profit of 8.97 until break even. After break even, your profit is coming down because you're going to have corporate tax now. And that means that for every single unit that you sell post break even is going to go down, right? Because you have to pay corporate tax. Now that you have the bare minimum price, you have the break even price. Now what you can do is actually you can then you have two options, right? So depending on there's two routes. If this is a completely new product, you can price at whatever price point you want. Just base it on like how many hours you're saving people or some kind of value point that you can explain to people, right? And you're going to be golden. Now, if it's a competing product for whatever market that's out there, and there are price points with competitors, now you can go out there and you can look at what the competitors are offering, and you don't look at, you can look at their pricing also, but now you can look at it with the frame of like, okay, I know what it costs me to generate this, and then you can assess like, are they making money or are they investing right now? All of this kind of stuff. And then you can benchmark against their values that they're providing And maybe you revisit the product and maybe you add stuff on top of the product to make it even more interesting or even more valuable. And then think up of new ways of putting a new price based off of that. But at least you know what your costs will be and if you can make a business out of this. And that is definitely a better way to look at pricing. Now, thanks for watching. I hope you like this type of content and that you'll go out there and revisit your pricing, or at least look at pricing in a new way and feel confident that when you go to market. Best of luck. See you in the next one.